So, Andrew, welcome to the Marketing Stack podcast. And if you're listening on the podcast or watching this on YouTube, welcome. Andrew is, I would say, probably one of the prolific people when it comes to just managing Twitter and sort of tweeting prolifically. I see so much from you, and I'm wondering, like, how do you actually go through all of that or create all of that? But to give you a brief introduction to Andrew, Andrew's on a mission to help rapidly growing companies educate their people and their customers in unique and engaging ways. That's what's on the website. And I will add to the fact that he's working on cohort-based courses specifically, is also involved with the collective with two other very influential creators, which is a 12-month accelerator program. And he's a fellow South African, which was my appeal to reach out to him to have a chat on the podcast. So, Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, Brian. I'm very, very excited to be here.
So, my first question, obviously, because of the South African background, like we had chatted briefly on the DMs on Twitter about timing of when you were at KPMG, because I was at KPMG around the similar time, and like your face is kind of familiar, but that world is just so huge because there's literally hundreds, if not thousands of people walking through the offices all day long. What was your, I know your background in terms of moving to the US because of the education piece and all that, but like you started your career with auditing. That for me was fascinating because it's like, okay, let's count beans first and then let's figure this other thing out.
And then teach people how to count beans.
So talk to me about that a little bit.
I always kind of like used to do quite well at school, and was, I guess, ambitious in that I thought I'm going to be the CEO of a company. Like that was sort of the career track that I left school thinking. So in South Africa, being a chartered accountant is like one of the best sort of stepping stones for that path. So it's like, oh, that made sense. Then I started studying accounting, auditing, stats, all that sort of stuff. It all, it was interesting, and it was sort of interesting, but it came naturally to me, so it was fine. So I just carried on following that path and qualified as an accountant, got a job at KPMG and started working there in the sort of apprenticeship. And I just realized like very quickly that I did not enjoy the actual work. And so, then I started, so luckily right at the beginning, these consulting firms have a lot of focus on training. So we go to these long, week-long training events. And I would meet and get to know the 4 or 5 instructors that we had, who were just, 2 years ahead of us, maybe early managers, 3, 4 years ahead. And I was like, I want to be these people. They are having so much fun. They get to stand up and teach people during the day and socialize at night, and it just seemed like the coolest thing to do. So I just made that commitment to want to do that, made a lot of connections and had conversations with people, and eventually started doing that in South Africa, and I just absolutely fell in love with it.
Because it comes down to, instead of checking what's wrong or what mistakes companies are making in their books or hiding or whatever the case may be, compared to let's help people do better at what they want to do or what they're trying to do.
Well, so initially it was teaching so I got into I think you was probably like supervisor, like it was like second, third year. I had to put my time in right before I could start teaching internally. And so then I first started teaching interns that were coming in. So they were maybe 3 years behind me. And then sort of like first years and second years. So like built up like that, and eventually started teaching partners on technical updates. And then I started in a part of the KPMG business, which was selling training to clients. And that's also when I started to get in the world of actually marketing an education product and learning about that. So it was very much like a progression of teaching very junior people all the way up and eventually getting that whole spectrum.
And it's funny how, like, I have the same or similar experience in terms of seeing, KPMGs or the big fours, like a lot of corporate companies have that sort of a progression or that career path for people where it's in the beginning, you're learning to do something, then you're sort of helping other people do that thing, whether it's a supervisory or managerial role, and then moving into like selling and then helping to grow the business. And I think from a creator point of view, there's a parallel there because I think that path is similar. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's a great point. I really like that. Yeah, because I think as a early stage creator myself, I'd say I'm learning all the time from the people ahead of me. And the great thing about the space is people are so willing to share. It's almost like part of the model. Like to create, you have to share your knowledge with people, which is fantastic, right? So you can learn from all of these incredible creators who are, a friend of mine, Justin Michael, calls them 10x creators. And they're 10x in 3 dimensions of it. So they're like 10 to the power of 3 times better than us as creators, or as me as a creator, but because they create high quality content. They have systems in place, and I'm getting there. Like you mentioned, the Twitter, so that's all systems, right? That's like makes me more prolific. And then they have leverage. They have the ability to create leverage and get their word out to more people. And yeah, so it's a cool space to be in because you just get to learn from people, and everyone's so willing to share.
One of the things I wanted to ask you was, so you moved to the US through KPMG. They brought you over. You had some of that going on. For somebody like me, like I've wanted to come to the US for a very, very long time. Would you say that moving to the US helped your career?
Yeah, definitely. So practically I got to experience a different side of the thing that I'm good at now, which is teaching people and creating learning experiences. So in South Africa, I was delivering all the training. Here, I learned to develop it. So I got really into like cognitive science and all that sort of stuff. So, but that could have been anywhere in the world. I think the fact that it was the States as well, I don't know. This is a South African thing. I've just recently written about this. So, in South Africa, there's sort of the tall poppy syndrome. Like you don't want to stand out in front of anybody and sort of like stick your head above everyone else. And like, so that's sort of, you kept in check. And also everyone kind of knows everyone. It's just smaller communities and stuff. Whereas I came here and it was just like a blank slate. I moved to New York, and you can spend your whole life in New York and still be anonymous. It's incredible. So that gave me this freedom to really explore what I wanted to do. And it sounds like cliche to say like find yourself, but it really was like you just have so much freedom to do that. You don't have to worry about what people who known you before think about you, and so all of those sort of things are out of it. And then the fact that in the US it's actually encouraged to talk about what you're doing and to be proud of achievements, and that some would say it goes too far, and that's that some people definitely do it. But I think that was really cool to be like leaning into the fact that like this is the thing that I'm good at. People are telling me that, and it gave me the courage, I guess, to pursue it.
So it's interesting you say that, because I felt kind of liberated when I left South Africa 6.5 years ago, and to the point where I didn't feel like I had these eyes on me all the time. It was a strange thing, because when I got to Bangkok, I was like, who? And I realized that nobody cared. Nobody, everybody's doing their thing. There's like 9 million people in the city. They're friendly, they're open, it's Thailand. Like who has a bad experience here? And it's taken me a long time mentally to adjust, or I'm still adjusting to that whole thing of like, oh, it's okay to tweet about this thing that I'm working on, or it's okay to mention amount of money that I've made for a client in terms of even a case study. And I think a lot of people have that problem. So even though we have the freedom to express ourselves creatively, that inner talk is putting us down. So what advice can you give, not only me, but also the audience listening?
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you said no one else cares. And let's get even more specific on that. So that, I think that's probably also true for South Africa. I think it's just, you just don't see it as that you had to come here to sort of see it. And now I think it's true for most people. No one cares. And that's actually really liberating, because it means you can experiment and make mistakes and no one gives a shit. No one remembers your mistakes. They will only, remember when you made it. And this, if you flip this around, it's the overnight success that took 15 years thing, because people only see that success, and it's like, no, that actually was a lot of like people messing up, making mistakes, and that's just learning, right? And just learning, and then eventually something hits and you get traction and whatever. So yeah, I think that was one part of it, where it's just like, just be okay with the fact that actually, like, lean into the fact that you should just experiment. I'll make this practical as well, just for those listening, that I'm going through this right now. I'm launching a product on Tuesday, and I'm like, I still do this. I'm obsessing over the sales copy, the emails that I'm sending out, all this sort of stuff. And I just need to sort of talk to myself here and be like, okay, just get it out. No one's going to care if it's not perfect. Also, these people know, like, and trust you already. I'm just doing it to a warmish audience, and kind of like know that you don't just have one shot. You're going to have more shots of this. You just got to get it out. And most importantly, get that feedback. There's no one's you're going to keep second guessing yourself, but the best people to tell you what to change and what to improve will be those that see it for the first time.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, I was just listening to an audiobook now where the author spoke about the difference between regret and, oh goodness, I'm blanking on the other word now. He spoke about the fact that you might regret something if you don't do it, but then if you do it, then there's the pain later is a different feeling. So you'd rather have that pain for the short term versus having the regret later on,
which is worse. Yeah, totally.
Which is far worse. Yeah,
I totally agree.
He used a nice word there, but I forgot what it was.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come soon.
You spoke about the systems to get your content out, and obviously that leads into the title of the podcast, which is the marketing stack. So what is your stack, and what are you using?
Yeah. So first of all, I think of it in two buckets. I think it's really important to be able to create quality content. You've got to consume quality content, right? And now that's so let's unpack that part, because that's sort of, I think, honestly, the engine. That's the key to everything. So first of all, how do you figure out what to? So there's two. Actually, just recently wrote about this. There's two sort of aspects to the capture part, which is, there's a philosopher from like the Renaissance era called Erasmus, who came up with this idea of the commonplace book, which was literally a book that obviously then, like, people would write in things people said, ideas, like, just it's their scrapbook of ideas, right? And the power of this book is that over time, as you flipping through it, you start to make connections between otherwise disparate ideas. And that's creativity. That's when you see, like, oh, this thing can be applied in this way, and you start to, like, so that, honestly, like, there are no such thing as totally original ideas, or new ideas. At least the originality comes from combining things that have already existed in new and interesting ways and putting your own spin on them. So having a commonplace book, a place where you can store all of that, is the one part. And then you've got to know what to consume, because we're in this, like, fire hose of information. So you have to have a way to filter all of that. And then you can turn to another great mind from the past, a physicist, Richard Feynman, who talks about, he sort of says, like, I'll paraphrase, genius is the ability to have favorite problems that you filter the world through. And every time you get a new piece of information, you test it against one of these problems and you see if it helps. And then every now and then it does, and people call that genius, right? So I found really helpful to have, like, actually literally write down, I think he says 12, but so whatever, your list of favorite problems that you're always thinking about. And then anytime you come across a book or a podcast or a tweet, it's you filtering it through that. And you're like, oh, could this help with this problem or this question that I'm thinking about? So practically how I do both of those things is so I store it in Rome, all of that stuff. I used to use Evernote for this. Notion's another option, but having a central space to just dump everything, not worrying too much about organizing it at the beginning. That's quite key. You just want to be able to capture it and be able to search it, obviously, and have some, like, maybe some ability to, well, obviously the ability, but have some tagging that you do initially so that you know, like, what was this related to? And then then capturing sources from outside, I use a tool called Readwise, which I find incredible. You listen to a podcast, you save a clip, it adds it automatically to Roam. If I, save a tweet, if I highlight an article online, it just saves it all into Roam. And so that just goes into an inbox, and every now and then I'll go through it and go, oh, that's interesting. That's about leadership or managing a team or whatever. And like, I'll just start to categorize stuff. And then we switch into, so that's the capture side. And we switch into creation. I now want to sit down and write about managing a team. You can pull up all of these sources and just sort of stare at them for a bit and be like, what's speaking to you? What's jumping out at you? What are you interested in? And then that's where I start. Because I think if you're interested in something, you're going to be able to really follow that rabbit hole. And then, hopefully you find, and I mean, doesn't always happen, but you find others are also interested in it. And then you've got something. But yeah, so it was a long-winded answer, but that's sort of the process.
No, that's perfect. And I'm glad that you answered it that way, because for a very long time, I think this has been my struggle. Apart from just not wanting to share too much online, there was also this thing of, well, what am I going to create? What am I going to write? What am I going to make a video about? And I didn't have the feeder system.
Yeah.
And so once I learned about the feeder system, and I actually like, oh, wait, that might be a thing to try, it became a lot easier to find ideas and then go and look at sources and like, oh, that person said this about this, and this person said this about that. I think it's this. And then it's like, oh, okay, now we can make a 5-minute video or a 10-minute video about it, because now I have an opinion and I can compare it to somebody else. And that I learned through Ali Abdal's PTYA program.
Yeah.
Because he talks about, he has a couple of different ways to create content, which he calls the content machine or idea generation machine.
Infinite content engine or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And I know you were influential in helping him create the Part-Time YouTuber Academy. So 2 questions there is, how did you get in touch with him? And 2, how much of an impact do you think PTYA made, or your influence on creating PTYA made, to the success of his business?
First of all, really good segue. That was impressive.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's an interesting story, because it sort of relates to what we've just been talking about actually as well, in that, once I started having this and I was then now packaging ideas and sharing them online, he announced in like, I think October of last year. I only started sort of sharing stuff publicly in August, and then so it's basically been a year. And I had like 300 followers back then. I think I'm over 4,000 now. That growth is just slow and steady and starts to compound. So like there's no like formula for this. You just have to constantly publish good quality content and find people that are interested in it, and then get to know them, make friends with them. And so I didn't even know Ali was following me at the time, but someone else tweeted that they were joining his course. I'd been a huge fan of his up to that point. It's like, he's doing a course on this stuff. I mean, I'm in. I just responded like, I'm definitely going to do it. And like, he then responded to my tweet, just said, Andrew, I've been following your content for ages. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'd love for you to help me. And I think he even said this in the tweet. I'd be willing to sponsor your seat in the program if you did that. I was like, wow, that was like a massive turning point for me. So we jumped on a call. We spent an hour chatting through stuff, and he's incredibly humble about the way he talks about my influence and just his brilliance. But he was like talked into doing a live cohort. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to he's been on Skillshare for ages, and he wanted to create another self-paced thing. But he was talked into it, and he's like, I have no idea how to do this. And what he's really good at as well, he brings people in. He's always got coaches, and he basically asked, we chatted, and we quickly figured out that I could help him figure out the scale side of it. Because a lot of course creators, when they will start with like 20, 30 people, and you can manage on your own. Because Ali's audience, his first cohort had over 300 people in it. Like, that's a whole nother ballgame. So what he needed to do, he needed a really robust mentorship model. And so I helped him develop that. And so, and we came, I came with my idea of what it looked like, which is this idea of destination and journey groups. And so Ali basically sets the destination in the live sessions that he does. And then the mentors set the journey. They create the space for the journey. So that's just to people to talk about, it's quite intimidating learning from Ali Abdal, because he's just like so prolific and so successful. But if you can then talk about what you've learned with people that are in the same stages of the journeys, you really accelerate your learning at that stage. And so yeah, I helped him design that. He came up with some really great ideas of calling them peer supporters, because they weren't really mentors yet, and it was his first cohort, so he didn't have alumni. So we definitely collaborated a lot back and forth and came up with just a really cool program, which now he's taken onto a whole nother level. But yeah, that was really fun. It was really cool to also see his behind the scenes.
Well, I did tweet about it, but I'll tell you now in person that his course, Part-Time YouTube Academy, was my single best attended course in my life ever, bar none. It's like I doubt that I'll be able to attend a better one, or if it is better, it'll be like massively better. The bar is set very high for me.
It's
but the thing is this, right? So if a lot of people are maybe in my situation, or even like you, just starting something that you said you're launching on Tuesday, is, you know, a lot of people don't have the resources. We don't have this pool of people, and we don't have maybe money for all the tools that are required to pull all of this off. So if one does want to create a cohort-based course, where do they start?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I've thought about this so much since I ran the On Deck Fellowship earlier this year, and we had 150 people in that program. There was a huge range of experience levels. And most of my experience had been with helping people that were quite mature in their business and were able to, you know, like you say, bring in resources and all that. But what I really was, I was really empathetic to the people just starting out, because I was that before, and I got lucky, and I got this sort of jump, or, you know, hit like kickstart with joining On Deck, and that helped me launch that. But without that, what I would have done, and this is what I would recommend to people, is start small and be okay with that. So if you can truly create transformations for people, then your course will grow. It won't grow as quickly as you want it to, because it's just hard to get attention and the marketing side of it, as you know, I'm sure you know more than me, but it will grow. Like you just have to keep focusing on that. So I always say to people, the best place to start is to do things that don't scale. Get on one-on-one calls with people. Host little workshops that only 5 people attend. Do a lot of those kind of things, because your goal is to, there's 2 parts of it. You've got to distill what, like, you're basically, it's the way I call it, the vehicle for transformation. So the transformation as a course creator that you can teach others, you have to have gone through yourself. So Ali Abdal's got 2 million subscribers on YouTube. He now teaches people how to start that journey. His vehicle for that is the course, and you have to make 5 videos, and just the idea of publishing consistently and all that. Then you've got to find a problem worth solving. So you've got to find, like, and that's the hard part, right? You've got to like find the market that's going to buy that thing. I always say, like, the vehicle for transformation doesn't change much, because it's your experience, it's your authentic self, it's all of that. So that doesn't change too much, maybe 20% of it. This part, the problem we're solving, can change all the time. So your job as a course creator is to find that fit, where those 2 fit. And the only way to do that is to test it against as many different problems as you can, until you find that fit. All right. So that's why I say get on one-on-one calls with people, get on in these workshops, and really listen to what people are struggling with. Because what you'll find is then you just need to make 20%, maybe less, tweaks to solve that problem. Because it doesn't matter if you're not solving the problem, right? You've got to do that. And then you've got that sort of like opening to just, you know, all of your experience and expertise can start to flow into.
Yeah. And then there's also the possibility of transitioning into it, because while a cohort-based course might be the best case scenario, there are other things that can be done, like recording the videos, uploading them to a platform, and then selling it to build up a little bit of capital, so that, you know, you test the content that way without actually delivering it live. Or you just go super basic, put a sales page up, landing page up, and then host it on Zoom. Like, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
lots of people around, you could do it on your own as well.
I almost recommend that actually, because I find the best way to get to your ultimate course is to run it live, because you get instant feedback and you'll make adjustments. And so it's, unless you're like really sure that of your content, I wouldn't recommend going down the route of recording a whole bunch of videos, especially if you put a lot of effort and production into them. But I like your suggestion of like, do it super basic. Again, like if you're solving a problem, people don't care how fancy the videos are, right? Like that's something you can reinvest in over time. But initially, some of the best things I've seen now is people do like weekend boot camps. And if you like can take people through a 2-day thing and you really solve a problem for them, they'll come back to you again, and they'll tell their friends as well. So like that, and that's how you'll grow. And then, and you'll learn like what else you can help with. And eventually your 2-day thing becomes a 2-week thing, and whatever, and longer.
I see them as confidence builders. So it's like little steps to build confidence, not only in marketing, but also in your own product. And like you said, matching that transformation to the people who want to solve that problem. It's something that I'm going through at the moment as I'm putting a few courses myself together. And even in terms of pricing, like I'm pricing it way lower than what I should be or I could be. But that's just because I'm testing it. Like I'm just trying it out and seeing what people are going to say.
What do you think about, sorry, do you mind if because I thought the other thing is that people should be thinking about is you don't actually have to have the course built out yet. You can sell it without that, right? What do you think about that, the idea of pre-selling something?
Yeah, 100%. If you can deliver or convince somebody, even just over the phone, without even having a landing page, that what you are trying to teach, what you are trying to help the person with, then you can collect money for that. And as long as they're okay with waiting a couple of weeks or, a couple of days or whenever you're going to launch officially and you have enough people, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I think that's the key. Like you just have to convince people that what you are building is valuable. And then there's a reward as well to be an early believer, an early adopter. You get that discounted price, you get to help shape the course. Yeah, a lot of cool things.
I also think if you are open about the fact that it's an alpha or a beta launch, people are a little bit less, the expectations are less. And so it's kind of like, yeah, okay, we'll give you a try. Yes, we want something out of it, but the community then becomes the important component. It's like, okay, let's learn together. I'm one step ahead of you. Let's build this thing.
I love that. I think expectation gaps is so key to think about. Write that down.
Oh, I made you grab your notebook. That must have been juicy.
That's it. It's idea capturing, man. No matter, it happens where you least expect it.
100%. I had somebody on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, Tom Lubelt, and he said of something very interesting, which I wanted to get clarity from you on, because he said cohort-based courses are the same as group coaching. Can you dig into that a little bit?
I don't agree with that. I think they're similar, but first of all, it depends on the size. So a cohort-based course of 6 people can be very much like a group coaching thing. So I think that's a key part of it. If you like I said, typical size is like 20, 30, 50. That's the range. That it's a very different ballpark, or a ball game rather, because I mean, I went through this with ODCC. So all I've been doing is private and group coaching up until that. And so that was the first time I actually had run a cohort. And now it's 150 people. So it's like an extreme. So I was like on the polar opposite of what I've been used to doing. And it's a totally different ballgame. So you have to be able to compress your ideas down to their like simplest thing. You have to be able to come up with application, implementation advice for people. And you have to create the environment for them to be able to take that action, like accountability, peer-to-peer feedback, support, all of those kind of things, which is really hard to do at that scale because people have such a vast range of experience with that. Group coaching, I found, is just way more individualized. You can give specific feedback to people and just help them with an unlock on something right away, and then they go off and do something else, and then they get stuck with something and you can help them. And really great coaches have that pattern recognition that they can go like, oh, okay, I've seen this before, like here's a couple of things you can try, but, you know. So yeah, I think they're very different, but it's definitely the scale part of it that amplifies that difference.
Yeah. What would you say is the current market for cohort-based platforms? Because obviously we have platforms to host like video calls, we have platforms to host videos to, for pre-recorded content. I know there's an upsurge, like Google Trends has just recently, in fact, January, started showing some graph activity on the search term cohort-based courses. What are you seeing in terms of development and the progression of platforms specifically for this format of teaching?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's something that I'm seeing now all the time. So a couple of the big ones in the space now, Maven announced a $20 million seed round earlier this year, and they are a cohort-based course platform. So people go in there, they sort of teach you how to do it, and then you host your course on there, and you give a share of your revenue. Disco is another one out of Canada that's really fast and up and coming, also venture backed. And then I was at a conference 2 weeks ago in San Diego, and so from that I had a lot of conversation. I just saw there were so many. There's another one I'm aware of now in Israel called Click2, and they focus on helping brick and mortar education providers go online. So another very interesting spin and niche that they're focusing on. I know of two people that were in my cohort of ODCC are building a platform. And so to answer your question, it's an explosion. There are just so many of them coming out virtually. I should mention, I know really well, and they're another one that's focusing on the space. So everyone here is trying to solve this problem that I think you've sort of alluded to. There's we use Zoom to host calls. We use Slack to communicate and have the community connect with each other. We use Luma to do the registrations for live things. There's lots of different platforms that people then connect with, Zapier and all these things. And these tools are looking to solve that problem, make it the one and only stack, and probably the marketing side of it as well, to be able to build funnels and all those kind of things. So yeah, I'm extremely excited by the space. I think it's huge, and I think just the online education market is just an absolute boom. Like we're at the beginning of the gold rush.
Yeah, I'm actually really happy that it's come this way, because I think we went through this era of having a lot of recorded content, and there will be a lot of recorded content on platforms, but even though people are saying, oh, there's live support and there's this Facebook group, but for me, the Facebook group acts more of a Q&A type of a space rather than a collaborative space. Yeah. And then even what you've set up with the peer supporters and the other people that are involved in facilitating and the reviews and all of those things. And obviously I'm only speaking from what I've seen in Ali Abdal's course, but the experience is way different to just consumption and then doing on my own.
Yeah. So, totally.
Yeah. Speak a little bit about that, because I think obviously being, we're a year and a half, year and 7 months into COVID, and people are now lacking more engagement, more connections. The consumption model is good for YouTube, good for that type of content. But in terms of active learning, classroom style learning, I think CBC is definitely the way to go. Yeah. Obviously you agree, but do you want to speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So people are craving human connection, right? And I actually see this. I think what's interesting to add to this conversation is I see this in the corporate side as well. So my sort of main business, Curious Lion, we work with B2B with companies to help them create training. And back in the day when we first started, we were just helping them create e-learnings and videos and whatnot, a lot of asynchronous stuff. But now we've gone all in on our only product now is helping companies create cohort-based learning sprints. And it's this idea of a flywheel of learning. So the problem that we solve for companies is creating a culture of continuous learning. So it's exactly what you're saying. It's bringing people together, and because you can't, companies do this, but it's not effective. Is just, you can't just broadcast new training courses for them and say, hey, we've got this LinkedIn Learning, now go and take as many as you want, right? It's just not effective. Where people really learn is getting together on a Zoom call and talking to each other and having and so then you can use some asynchronous content beforehand, say, hey, watch all of this, or read this or whatever, and it gives them a common language or a lens through which to then have those discussions. But it's in the discussions that people learn so much, because they're like, oh, you are having this issue, I had the exact same thing, here's what I tried. And that person's like, I trust you because you're in the same you're in the same stage as me, or you're same level as me, whatever. So yeah, we're seeing so much success at companies with that, and people, and it's like kind of like, well, there's nothing magic about this. Like, we're just bringing people together. Right?
It's not rocket science. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So you use the word learning and you use the word transformation earlier. So the transformation only happens with action. And the way to get people to act is to put them together, to work together in groups. Because when there's accountability, that's when more stuff happens. It's just kind of the way that we've always functioned as human beings.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else you want to talk about? We're running a little bit out of time, obviously.
Yeah. I think in general, for the sort of stuff that you're doing, I think what's interesting and a big problem for all course creators, a big challenge, I'd say rather, is building an audience and thinking through that marketing side of it. And I don't know, maybe as a final thought, one of the things I often think about is how similar teaching and marketing, because you have to like get someone's attention and trust in both those fields to be able to then either educate them or sell them something, right? And so it's often you're doing both. So you're educating to sell, or even the reverse is true. Sometimes you have to sell them on something, an idea, to be able to then educate them about it. So I think it's super interesting. I think the world of marketing and teaching there's a lot of overlap.
Especially now, because I think we're moving more into knowledge-based content, especially. So it's like build the trust, and that trust becomes the marketing component, which is now going to attract people into like, oh, what else does he or she have? Before it was all like just salesy stuff, or, hey, buy this car. It looks nice and it has a fancy caption. So and you're a fan of the car, of the brand. So cool. It's more communication around that.
Yeah, communications is a key part of that, and it's this move from that traditional, TV media, which was centralized. Like if you have to buy that time, and then you broadcast that message to people. And now it's decentralized. You can have conversations with people, and I think what that means is that there's a move away from needing volume, which you have to have to justify the TV type to ad buys, to LTV, to lifetime value of customers, right? So building relationships with them that last years, and that they buy multiple products from you because you're helping them on their journey, and you're growing with them and they're growing with you.
Yeah. One last question before we end off. Why Twitter?
This is great, because I need to clarify my answer here. So the pithy answer is that it's been by far the most powerful tool in my growth in the last year. I think why that's the case is it's the meeting place for ideas. It's the place where you don't, and I try and like tell my friends who are not on Twitter. So those on Twitter that are like, no, it's an absolute cesspool of, you're following the wrong people. Like, you need to not follow news, and you need to follow people that share ideas. And then it becomes less of a broadcast platform and more of a conversational, relationship-based platform. And all the magic starts to happen in the DMs. That's why, that's how we're on this podcast. You reached out to me, and apologies for my son in the background. I do that all the time for my podcast. And it's just like, you get to know someone through the ideas they share, And if you're, and there's a shift from being a voyeur to being sort of a creator, and that's people. There's a process to go through to do that. But once you start to do that, they can see your ideas, and then it's easy to see where they connect. You go, hey, like we're thinking about the same stuff. We should probably jump on a call. And so it's such an organic way of doing that. Like, and there's never been. You've always like had to. It's always been like geographically sort of separated, right? Or like you were in a community already. This is like a free, permissionless. You can join whatever community you want. You just have to find.
Yeah, I use TweetDeck sometimes to search keywords and just have a column of like finding people who are talking about similar stuff, and that helps me to also in the content creation phase to curate ideas of like, okay, what are different people thinking around a specific keyword or a specific topic. That does sometimes help me fill some gaps for me. Where can people reach you? Where can they find you? You have a podcast which is very nicely named.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. It's How Did You Learn That? It's super fun. I get to just pick people's brains and understand how they built up their expertise and learn from them. So definitely check that out. Twitter is the best place to get in touch with me. The handle is Bazzaruto, BAZZARUTO. And otherwise, check out the website, curiouslionlearning.com, because that's where both the sort of company side and creator side, I'm starting to sort of build that out and explain to people how we can potentially work together. So, yeah.
Cool, Andrew. Thank you so much. I had a good time getting to know you and chatting to you here. I appreciate you being on the podcast and meeting with me.
Yeah, thank you so much. You have fantastic questions. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.